Brightspace is the LMS that helps you reach every learner. It makes teaching and learning easier by letting you focus on what's most important, your students and their experience. You can start building courses quickly by simply dragging and dropping content into them. And even create content right in the system, like adding images or videos with just a few clicks. The responsive interface looks great on a laptop, tablet, or smartphone, and it works on any device. Brightspace also lets you teach the way you want. Built-in communication tools let you create a connected learning experience with homepage news feeds, online discussions, and web conferencing. And whether you're fully online, blended, or flipped, Brightspace lets you use lots of different pedagogical approaches, like competency-based education and gamification. It helps you work smarter too. Built-in analytics lets you quickly check on how everyone in the class is doing. You can also dive deeper to review individual performance in more detail. And with smart rules and smart tools, you can automatically trigger activities based upon what a student does or doesn't do to personalize their learning experience. Easy, flexible, smart. That's Brightspace.
Good afternoon. My name is Vikas Kota. I'm the founder of T4tv. It's a great pleasure to once again host a T4tv session with you. We've tried a new time in the day because my guests, I think, is quite important. We're trying to make sure as many people understand and learn from him as possible. And so I'm delighted that we could stream at this time of day. Friends, you will know that we have World Education Week that is coming up very shortly from the 3rd to the 8th of October. And this is a celebration of 100 schools around the world who have come forward and said they're going to share how they've developed their expertise and actually share their experiences and how they've done so. I can't think of a much more worthier and noble thing to actually do with my time than actually make sure that voices from the grassroots really get a platform to speak about a very important subject, which is around expertise. We want to lift the boat for as many people as possible. And the way we do that is by making sure that all schools, do much better. And we do that by sharing, and forgive the cheesy phrase, but sharing and caring for each other. And so, friends, you should go over to World Education Week or worldeduweek.org and register for one of 100 school-based events. And there's another 20 high-impact organizations that are also hosting events. They include MIT, the famous university. They include the UCL Institute of Education. They include the Brookings Institute, as well as a number of very excellent NGOs from around the world who have been so engaged in education. And I think we have a lot to learn from all of these. It's suffice to say, and needless to say, this is a great professional development opportunity that we should take up. And so, I would love to also find out where you're watching from today. But before you do, and if you're on Facebook in particular, you have to give permission to streamyard.com/Facebook for us to be able to see your profile picture and your name. Otherwise, it just comes up as hello from wherever you're saying hello from. And that, I think, would be a travesty because we'd like to know who is watching and so that we can engage with them more. Friends, so today's topic actually is phenomenal in the sense that my guest is someone who has not just dabbled, but really immersed himself in the world of education. He created an organization called Stir Education, which I will invite him to speak about very shortly. But before we do that, I should also tell you that today is a momentous day in the history of T4. And for the simple reason that we actually published and launched our big report, which is the world's largest survey of teachers and the use of technology during the pandemic. And what really excites us is that over 20,000 teachers from 165 countries actually participated and really took part in something that was quite in-depth and very long as an exercise. So I want to thank all of you for, if you did participate and if you took the survey, thank you for doing so. But before I say any more, I want to show a very short promotional video that will give you an idea. And we'll be sharing this video in a couple of days' time. But so consider this a premiere. I hope you liked the last bit, which was asking you to come and join our T4 community. You'll be pleased to know that that was my own personal touch. But without further ado, I do want to introduce our guest for today's talk. Now, Sharath Jeevan is a phenomenal friend and someone who's quite prolific in the sector. He's one of the world's leading experts on reigniting our inner drive, intrinsic motivation as it's referred to. He founded and led STIR Education, which is the world's largest intrinsic motivation initiative. And they reignited the motivation of over 200,000 teachers in 35,000 schools and 7 million children in emerging countries. He's currently the executive chairman of Intrinsic Labs, which supports organizations all around the world to solve deep motivational challenges, from governments to leading UK universities and high-profile corporations. He has many accolades to his name, but one thing that really, I must tell you that I've been referring to him increasingly as, is the Malcolm Gladwell of our times. The way that he has written his book through anecdotes, through stories of his life experiences, I think is immensely powerful. And for that reason, I'm pleased to welcome Sharath to our live stream. Welcome, Sharath.
Thanks, Vikas. So great to be with you.
Well, Sharath, being equated to Malcolm Gladwell, how does that make you feel, sir?
No pressure, Vikas. What can I say? But it's so, and I get a chance to speak to Malcolm Gladwell during the process of writing the book, and it's amazing to have these amazing role models in writing. As as you said, I've been working on intrinsic motivation very practically with hundreds of thousands of teachers, but I wanted to see if the book, Intrinsic, could really inspire many others in all walks of life to apply some of the lessons we've been learning.
And so, Sharath, you heard that today we launched our report and the survey, and I'm sure you received an advanced copy. So do you have, there's a few things in there which actually speak to this agenda about motivation. What is it that stands out for you?
Yeah, so let's just have the context, because I think we're really in a motivational crisis when it comes to teachers around the world. In the UK, where you and I are sitting today, 40% of our teaching workforce want to leave the profession. In countries like Uganda, it's almost double that. It's over 80%. So, it's going to be hard to secure a good future for our young people if we don't get this teacher motivation question right. And, the work that I've been doing and the research shows, and for the book, is that, this concept of purpose is so important. The sense of helping and serving others as a teacher. Obviously, every teacher does that as part of their job. Teaching is an intrinsically purposeful profession. But what I saw in the survey was that this has been a good chance actually for teachers to step back and remember that purpose. They have a bit more time. They're able to rekindle some of these relationships, even if it's online. So maybe it's a good time that way. The second lever is around autonomy, the sense of being in control of their lives. And often in classrooms, teachers are often very micromanaged. They feel everything is dictated to them. Perhaps the remote learning piece has given them a bit more space for that autonomy and a bit more space to drive things in their own style. I think mastery has been difficult because obviously you're not in the school together. I define mastery as being on an infinite journey to be on the best versions of ourselves we can be, constantly improving. That's been tougher, but I really saw in the survey some really good examples where teachers were trying out new ways of interacting with students, new ways of building relationships that were very positive. So I actually came out with a real sense that maybe this has been and I was surprised, a real sense of upliftment and maybe reignition of motivation. The challenge now is we come back to the real world, and in the UK we're already there. Can we sustain that motivation as we go forward?
I mean, there were a couple of things that actually were quite counterintuitive, in the survey. And so the first one was, we make this assumption that it's younger teachers that actually will do better at grappling with technology. But what our survey has found that those teachers who've been in the classroom for much longer actually are the ones who absolutely embrace technology. I thought that was a fascinating insight. And the second one was, we asked this question about not just are you thinking about leaving the teaching profession, but we asked them in terms of how satisfied are you with your teaching during these times, or a question of that sort. And the response that we got to that question was overwhelmingly teachers felt they're now better teachers as a result of the pandemic. What do you have to say about that, and how do you apply your intrinsic motivation lens to that?
Yeah, so I think a lot about mastery. One of the things I tried to talk about in the book, Vikas, was this idea that mastery for a teacher is so multifaceted. And I used the example of the Gates Foundation, which is a wonderful foundation, but it spent $250 million trying to decode and specify what makes a great teacher. And it was actually that, unfortunately, a failed attempt at precision. They to their credit, admitted that. But the idea is teaching is an incredibly, what I call in the book, a wicked profession. There is no easy technical solution. I saw at the beginning the Lemon Foundation ad flash across. I was talking to Camilla, who co-directs the foundation, and she gave me an example in the book where Brazil had TV teaching going on right over the pandemic. But kids were not, they had the best teachers in the country doing that teaching. But kids would say to, their local areas that these are not my teachers. There was no relationship there. So I think what this has shown us, and what the survey is really interesting in showing, is that the breadth of what teaching entails. And it's not just the pedagogy, not just the curriculum. It's this human and relational skills, this ability to redevelop the lifelong learning muscle for young people, and that love of learning through deep role modeling relationships. I think that's all coming out of what the survey is telling us here.
And so, unsurprisingly, because you're here, Sharath, we have a global viewership. And so we have someone called Citizen Kankam watching on YouTube from Ghana. We have a legend who is Mehmood Khan, who's retired, but today greeting us from Augusta in Georgia, playing golf, I hope, Mehmood. We have Alejandra, who is watching from Argentina. We have Daniel from Nigeria. Alejandra actually goes on, says, congratulations for the survey, incredible information. I agree. And just the data sets are quite incredible. And jumping into the topic about education, Sharath, the question I suppose that we think about is, we have all these accountability measures and standards and structures. In the UK, we have Ofsted as an example, and inspections. Why do they negatively impact teacher motivation? What is your take on this?
Yeah, and I think the survey was interesting because I think in a way the teachers had a little bit of a window to feel a bit less regulated, if you like. And so, what motivation thinking would tell us is that we all need some level of accountability in a system, right? Some basic level. What has happened, though, is we've ratcheted up accountability so much. It's become the main way we incentivize, I wouldn't even use the word motivate teachers and school leaders. And it's got to such ridiculous extents that in the UK, for example, many head teachers I talked to for the book, when I asked them, what is the purpose of your job? Remember, purpose is about how we help and serve others. They weren't talking about young people. They weren't talking about the communities they serve. They were talking about, my purpose is to achieve a good Ofsted score or rating or to appear high up in the league table. So I think we've confused the baby with the bathwater. Accountability should be what I'd call a hygiene factor, something that we need to have in place, but it's not a deep motivator. And really, once we get past those basics, we should be really trying to drive these elements of purpose, autonomy, and mastery in the teaching force, in my view.
I mean, there's a lot of systems, though. It's very difficult. Like, when you think about, schools sometimes talk about how parents apply the pressure of being an outstanding school. And so the school feels it has to jump through hoops to achieve that. Otherwise, parents kind of start taking a stick to them, right? And so, I mean, you're caught in this perpetual cycle. How do we, the next thing I want to ask is, how do we move away from this fear and compliance culture in our school systems?
Yeah, I think that the survey that really brilliantly showed this, because that you shared earlier, it might be almost the first taste of freedom. Think of it like that first pineapple that Robinson Crusoe, bites coming off the island and so on. That sense that we don't need to, we can still be great professionals and trust each other without all this crazy level of accountability. And I think one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and I talk about in the book as well, is this conversation that needs to happen between parents. And there are a lot of parenting ideas in the book, teachers and employers, because what I'm seeing a lot is the world of work, and I do a lot of work, around how do we stay motivated now in our workplaces. That's becoming more and more wicked. So more and more work that is going to be automated is about the human aspect of what we do. If you're a doctor, for example, in probably 20, 30 years, you won't be doing procedures. You'll be looking at a robot and helping guide the robot and make sure that the patient feels safe and secure. So those human skills are becoming more and more important. Parents, of course, are also employees, right? Or employees, they work as well. They can see that. But we have this kind of world where the world of work is going one way and the world of education is going the other way, almost, in a more Victorian sense in some regards. So I think having that open conversation, I hope Intrinsic, the book, helps do this to parents. But what do you really value? Let's really look at what the world looks now. It's not the same world that you and I grew up in 20 or 30 years ago. I know we're young at heart, Vikas, but so I think we have to adjust to that reality and change parenting expectations alongside it, but really thinking about the labor market as one of the main ways to frame that change as well.
Fantastic. And if you're watching this online, if you have any questions for Sharath, please do leave a comment. Sharath, your fame reaches so far. We also have Shamal from Iraq saying hello. I just love the fact that these platforms exist where we can actually have, and take you to all these places where I think your learnings and your lessons actually are being taught. And so, Sharath, I come back to this whole thing about inner drive, right? What does it make? What does it take to actually ignite or reignite this inner drive, especially of teachers, whilst abiding by all these accountability measures that we talk about? And so tell us, in terms of, is there an easy way to understand this or explain this?
Yeah, so I talk about in the book, because this idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic, or internal versus external motivation. And think of it a bit like driving a car where, your extrinsic motivation, doing things because someone else outside has asked you to do it. It's a bit like driving a diesel car, right? You'll get from A to B, but it's rarely a pleasant ride. Intrinsic motivation is about doing something because it's genuinely fulfilling, satisfying, even enjoyable. And I think the more we live our lives by intrinsic principles, the more something happier, more fulfilled we'll be. And over the long term, the more successful. And I shared some of the very strong evidence for that in the book. So I think part of it is thinking, if you're a teacher in Iraq or in Ghana, there's amazing people around the room here, there's a lot you can do in your own classroom. I think that's the first message. We have a lot more autonomy. Remember, autonomy is about us feeling at the wheel of our lives than we think in our classrooms. Often our systems force us to teach in terms of what we teach. That's pretty fixed. But how we teach is very open. And so we can, teach the same content we have to, but have a lot more freedom and innovation how we teach and genuinely engage kids so they develop that love of learning. So that's probably the first piece. The second thing I'd say very practically is have that conversation with your line manager. It could be a middle leader, a senior leader, your principal or head teacher. Talk about what's getting in the way of your purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And one of the trends that's happening a lot now in the world of work is called job crafting, where there's no longer the world of fixed job descriptions. You have to do certain things, but we can also tailor jobs to our own unique interests and passions. So do a lot yourself and then bring your leadership team around you and really have that conversation about how you can reignite that motivation in your working life as well.
And we talk about you talked about autonomy, but you also speak about mastery. In all of your conversations and especially in your book, and you discuss you've coined a phrase which is smart mastery essentials. How can school systems and leaders support teachers and educators to develop mastery, practically speaking?
Yeah, so again, when we think about teachers, we tend to think about it in terms of curriculum knowledge, also in terms of sort of technical knowledge as well, pedagogical knowledge. But teaching is far more than that. It's about relationships. It's fundamentally a human profession. And what we can try and do as school systems is try and acknowledge that. So, remember that Gates Foundation example, we can't reduce this down to paint by numbers, right? In front of a teacher, there are millions of potential permutations and combinations of different children, subjects, topics, you name it, right? So I think if we can accept the humanity or the humanness of teaching, we can set up our systems to really encourage that human interaction. First of all, let's not load teachers, and especially school leaders, with 100% teaching loads. They need some time to plan, to think, to reflect, to work together, to bring out those, that love of learning that we talked about, for example. And then we can also do a lot, I think, to really create more collaborative spaces. I think T4 is a great example. We do have these where teachers can come together across schools, across systems, and learn together and consciously achieve that sense of deliberate practice on things they want to work on as well. So those are two things we can do immediately.
And then you also touch on, thanks for that, Sharath, and you also touch on this subject about talent nurturing rather than talent management in their roles as teachers, right? How can you practice this nurturing of talent?
So what's happened in education, I think, because of the pressure on results that we often see, because the easiest way to get results is to select the best kids, right? We see time and time again, some of the PISA data we see shows that many of the sort of quote unquote top schools in the world are already top in terms of the absolute results, but it's really just selection. The kids would have done pretty well anyway, right? So I think we need to have a different sense of education. And I talked about in the book this idea of talent nurturing, where really great talent nurturers in sports, entrepreneurship, philanthropy, whatever, they take their talent owners, in this case students, to places they wouldn't have got to otherwise. And I think teachers at their best are the ultimate talent nurturers. And I talk in the book about my story. I got to Cambridge University for undergraduate. I wouldn't have got there had it not been for the nurturing of one particular teacher. So we make these really important areas of our lives. And it's really important as teachers, we keep our young people and children motivated, enjoying what they do. We open up new connections, new ways of seeing the world, and we connect them to other sources of expertise and inspiration so they can be handed on to the next nurturer. So it's really that deep connection that we believe in, and knowing that child and really helping them be the best version of themselves they can be, not what we think they should be. I think that's the final characteristic of a great nurturer.
Well, Sharath, thank you so much for participating in this T4tv live stream. I want to show everyone your book because you must be very proud of this, and it's a weighty tome. And I can't recommend you all actually going to Amazon or whichever bookstore that you use and buying a copy of my friend Sharath's book. As I explained, Sharath is the Malcolm Gladwell of our times, an incredible storyteller helping us understand and navigate wicked problems. And so I would very much recommend that you buy this book today. Sharath, thank you so much. And I know that we will continue talking because I know that I have really enjoyed learning from you as to how we do reignite our inner drive and making sure that we do what we do. And I'm sure teachers around the world appreciate all the work that you have done in the past through your through STIR, but actually as you go forward to share some of those learnings and the lessons and how they can really apply themselves to making sure that every child receives a much better quality of education. Do you have any final words to contribute?
No, just saying that because I've been inspired equally by what T4 is doing, what you've been doing. I so believe in its vision and mission. Please, this is the start of the conversation. I hope you enjoyed the book, but I hope you also engage around this topic. It's so important for our professional and personal success. And the book also talks about our lives as parents, as spouses, or boyfriends and girlfriends, and our lives as citizens as well. Please continue the conversation. The links are on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and I want to be sharing and posting a lot around this topic and really working with the teaching community around the world to really help we build a movement for change in the system.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Sharath, and we look forward to seeing you all at the next T4 TV Live. For now, goodbye.